Some time ago, I discovered these cool looking mathematical shapes called attractors. And these attractors are created by taking their unique differential equations and then calculate what the x, y, z coordinates are over time. And I found them so cool that I even did a video about how to create this Aizawa attractor in Blender. However, the techniques used in that video are very inefficient and outdated, so to say. Because with all the new nodes that were added in Blender 4.0 and 4.1, we can make a way better system to create these beautiful attractors. So I thought it would be very much worth it to dive back into the world of attractors again and to change our old node setup from this to this. In my example that I will show you in this video, I will be creating this Halvorsen attractor. However, you should be able to do this tutorial for any attractor that you want to use. So, to get started, we want to start off by adding in a cube. And for this cube, we're going to create a new geometry node. However, we're going to remove the group input because we don't need the actual cube. What we are going to start off with is a points node. And this point, we want to give that a random starting position. So if we do a random value node and we set this from float to vector, we can connect the position like this. And now it already gets a random position. However, let's make the min and max over here a little bit more procedural. So let's add in a value node, which we set on 0.5. And we want to make it that the max value is 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, and the min value minus 0.5, minus 0.5, and minus 0.5. So if we connect both over there, we can also add in a math node. And for the min value, we set it on multiply, and we multiply the min value by -1, so that we now have a nice little system. And this point, we want to move this point over time or over a certain iterations. And in the previous video, we used the simulation zone for this. However, then we have to wait the entire simulation for the shape to appear. No, what we are going to do in this video is we're going to use the repeat zone. And let's connect the points node like this and then the geometry like that. Let's first make the system so that we can make it that when we make the iterations higher, that the point starts moving per iteration. So what we want to do is a set position node. And if we set the offset now on 0.1 on the z-axis, for example, you will see that when we put the iterations up or down, that we move the point up and down. But for now, let's set the z-axis back on 0, because what we want to do is we want to create an attribute. And this attribute is going to keep track of what the position of this point is over time. So if we do a store named attribute node right over here, we can name this pos or something like that. And we can also set this from float to vector because the position is a vector. And each iteration, we want to add something to the previous iteration of position. So to do this, we can do a named attribute node. And then as the name, we just set the position over here. And then if we connect the attribute with the value, now we're basically saying, okay, the previous position of the point is the same as the current position of the point. So basically it's standing still. But if we want to update this over time, we can do a vector math node right over here. Keep this on add. And now if you set this on 0.1, basically now we're doing the same thing as when you set the offset higher. However, if you now put the iterations, you see nothing is happening. That's because we also need this named attribute to be the position of the set position. And now we're getting the same as before. But this is the only way that we can implement actually the formulas within the position. Otherwise, that's not really possible. Okay, you see now that when we move the iterations up and down, that the point moves up and down. That's good. However, what we want is that the point is not just moving, but that the point leaves a trail of points. So that we're kind of getting a snake or something like that. So basically what we want to do is each iteration, we want to move the point, but we also want to keep a copy of the point on the previous position. So to do this, we can click on the repeat zone and press N to make this sidebar open up. And then if you click on node and then under repeat, you can click on plus to create a new geometry socket. And this one we can name joint or something like that. And each iteration, we want to join the top geometry with the joint geometry. And now if you put this into join like that, and if we connect join with the group output, then you will see we're now getting a trail of points. So from here, we can actually start implementing the formula of our attractor. And we're going to implement that in the add node over here. So let me make some space over here and over there. so that we have enough space to implement our nodes. So what we want to start with is first getting the x, y, and z coordinates of each point. So we do this by having a position node. And to get the separate x, y, and z values, we can do a separate x, y, z, connect that like this, and now we have control over the separate x, y, and z sockets. However, before I continue, what I like to do for this is taking these nodes and then to make the entire node setup that we're going to create for these formulas to group them into one node. And to group them, you can do Ctrl G, and then you see we're getting this. And by the way, if you want to get in or out of this group, you can press Tab. So then you see we have a group node over here. So if you press Tab, we can go back into this. And you see, okay, we have the x, y, and z positions now. However, if we take a look at our formulas, the only extra parameter that we have besides the x, y, and z is the a parameter. And to get this a value into here, we can click on the group input, and then you can click on this plus over here and click on input. And now this is named socket, but we can name this a for now, so that we know this is the a value. And from here, we're basically going to recreate these formulas with nodes. So let's start with minus ax. So we first want to do minus a. You see that we have to do that for every single one. So what we do is a math node, and we do multiply a by minus 1. And this, we want to multiply that by x. So if we take this multiply node, shift D it to over here, we can multiply this by x. And if you want to keep your overview with all of these math nodes, we can rename each node to each step that it's doing. So if you take this multiply node, for example, you can go under node, and then you can give this a label minus a. And this one, we can do minus ax. And now we have to create 4y. So if we take this math node, shift D it to over here, we take the y and we multiply that by 4 and then rename this to 4y. This, we want to subtract that from the ax. So we take this ax node and we do subtract, and we subtract from this one, we subtract this one. And then you can do this minus 4y. And this is how we continue. So for the 4z, we take the 4y node and we shift D it again. We connect the z value with the multiply node like this, and we rename this to 4z. And we want to subtract this again. So let's take this one, shift D, and subtract it from the rest. And we can rename this one into minus 4z, like that. And then the last thing that we need to do is y to the power of 2. So if you take this multiply node again, shift D it to over here, this time we want to set it on power. The base is going to be the y-axis like this, and the exponent is going to be 2, so that we do y to the power of 2. And this, we want to subtract that again from everything else. So shift D over here, subtract it from the rest. And I also see now over here, we have to make this y to the power of 2, of course. And also over here, we can do minus y to the power of 2. So now we have the first formula already. And this first formula is going to be for the new x coordinates. So to get that out of this group output, we want to do a combine xyz again. And this output is going to be the x value of the combine xyz, like this. And now we have to do the same thing for the y and the z. So let's do that. However, you see that the three formulas are quite similar. It's only switching some values. So what we can do is just take the entire thing and then shift D it over here. And this, we're going to change it so that it's this formula. So the ax needs to be a y. So we put the y in there and then we change it to a y. The 4y transforms into the 4z. So let's take this 4y and let's put it as 4z. And let's connect the z as the value. And then the 4z transforms in the 4x. So let's take this 4z and make it 4x. And let's connect the x value like this. Then the y to the power of 2 transforms into z to the power of 2. So let's take this node, rename it to z to the power of 2, and connect the z instead of the y, like this. And let's also change it over here, of course, the name. So a y and 4z. And this one the same. So y, z, and x. And over here, y, z, x, and z. And then we have the second formula, so we can connect this as the y. And then for the z-axis, we kind of do the same thing. So we take the whole thing again, Shift D to duplicate it. And then we can make this one into a Z and we connect the Z. The 4Z of this one transforms into 4X. So we can rename this one into 4X and connect the X with that. And this 4X transforms into 4Y. So take this 4X and do 4Y. And then connect the Y-axis with this. And then the Z to the power of 2 transforms into X to the power of 2. So you can take this Z to the power of 2 and make it X to the power of 2 and connect the X-axis, of course. And then let's also change the rest over here again. So Z and X, and then Z and X over here, and also Y over there. And then do Z and the X and the Y and the X at the end, like this. And now we can connect this as the Z-axis of our combine XYZ. And now we have our vector that updates the points over time so that we create that shape of the attractor. So this is going to be the output of the group that we've just created. And now we can go out of this group. So if we press tab now, we see we have created our group over here. And the only thing we need to change is the A parameter over here. And by the way, on the internet, I found that the good value for this A parameter is 1.4. So let's put it on 1.4. You can change this whatever you like, of course. And this, we want to connect that with the add over here. But then you see the points are kind of going into nowhere. And that's because we have to do two things to make this look good. The first thing we have to do is we have to scale down the strength of this named attribute. So if we do a vector math node, which we set on scale, we can set this scaling on 0.005. Then you see it looks like this. Another thing that we have to do is we have to set the iterations higher, of course, but like way higher, because you will see if you set this on 1,000, then you're already getting something, right? Something like that. But if you set this on 15,000, then you're already getting a good shape. You might want to rotate it a bit and scale it a bit, but now you see you're getting that attractor shape, which is really cool. I think you already start seeing that this technique is way easier than the technique that we've used in the previous video. So that's good, but you will see that it will get even better. Because now this attractor only consists of points, right? And these points are not connected with each other. And in the previous node setup, we used all of these nodes to connect the points with each other. However, since Blender 4.0, we have a beautiful node called points to curves node. And if you connect that, then you see it converts all the points into one very long curve, which is amazing. And now this curve obviously doesn't have any thickness yet. So what we want to do is a curve to mesh node. And as the profile curve, we want to do a curve circle. Let's do that for now. And let's put the curve circle into the profile curve and you will see that looks really good. However, because if I change anything in the curve circle, for example, or in any other node, it wants to recalculate every single node in this. So all those 15,000 iterations are calculated over and over again every time you change something in the nodes that come after that. And to fix this, we have one wonderful node, which is really powerful. We have the bake node. And with the bake, we can kind of pre-calculate all the operations that are happening before the bake node, so that it doesn't have to recalculate that over and over again when we change something in the curve circle or in any other node, for example. So if you now click on bake, you will see it will bake it, and then it's done already. And now if I change anything in the curve circle, you see that the response rate of Blender is way better than before. So I really appreciate the Blender developers for implementing this bake node into geometry nodes. It's really powerful. However, there's one more thing that I want to show you, because now we are using the curve circle as the profile curve of the curve to mesh node, and that results in a tube, right? Let me show you how you can make any kind of shape for this profile curve. And to do this, we're going to create a new object. So if you press Shift A, you can import a plane. And this plane, let's move that over here. And we're going into top view numpad 7 and then also into edit mode for this plane. And then in edit mode, let's press Ctrl R and add in 4 loop cuts by scrolling on your mouse wheel. And then let's press Ctrl R again to do the same thing horizontally. And now what we can do, for example, is taking this edge and press G and Y and move it down, for example. And these two, move it like this. Yeah, something like that. It doesn't really matter for now. So like that and like this. And let's say we want to have this shape as the profile curve of our attractor. What we want to do is we only want to keep the outer edges. So to get only the outer edges, we can select the vertices that are on the inside of this. So like that, and like this, and like this, and like this, and like this. And then you can press X to delete vertices. And now we have this wireframe. And this wireframe, we can rename that maybe over here into profile curve. If we go back into our attractor node group and we drag in our profile curve into our node setup, then we can remove the curve circle for now and we can connect the geometry of the profile curve. However, you see that doesn't work yet, right? It doesn't do anything. And that's because this is not a curve yet. This is now a mesh. So we want to convert this into a curve. So let's do a mesh to curve node. And then you will see that works and you're getting a nice custom shape for your attractor. And I think that looks already way better. If you don't want this to look so smooth, then you can do, for example, a set shade smooth node after this and turn off the shade smooth. And then you see you're getting the hard edges of it. However, if you want to have it smooth and you want to have some bevel on it, then I recommend to do a fillet curve node and set this on poly. And then you will see if you set the radius lower, you will see you can bevel the thing. But don't go too far with this because you're adding a lot of vertices. But I think it will look pretty cool because now we can put the set shade smooth node actually on shade smooth like this. And if you want to make the radius now bigger, you can add in, for example, a set curve radius node over here. And then you can make this bigger like that, like this. And you see it's getting a little bit laggy now, but that's because we have the fillet curve over here. If you want, we can turn that off and you see it's a lot more responsive. So then you can do it like this and that looks like a pretty cool shape, to be honest. So that's cool. And to add in a material, yeah, that's actually the same as always. So we want to go into the shader editor. And then if you click on new to create a new material for this, we can make this base color, for example, blue and maybe a bit metallic. But let's also, of course, go into material preview mode so that we can see it. But then you see, of course, we don't see it because in geometry nodes, we have to assign this blue material to this object. So if you do a set material node right over here, you can set material as blue. And then you see that looks quite cool already. A very quick last thing. If you see that you did the exact same thing as I did, but then with a different attractor and it's not working, you might want to play around with the scale value over here because sometimes 0.01 works and sometimes 0.05 works, but you can play around with what value works for what attractor. And also the number of iterations will also be different for each attractor, but you can play around with it until you get the right result, of course. And in some occasions, if that doesn't even work, you can also take a look at this value node so that you make the start position of this point a little bit bigger, so to say. But those three things are really the things that you should play around with. And then you should be able to get other attractors too. So I hope I was able to amaze you with more mathematical equations in Blender. I really like these kind of videos because they're really technical and a bit more advanced. So I really like those. And the results are, as you can see, pretty nice too. However, if you're looking at these nodes and you're thinking, I don't know what all of this is, and you're like, I wish there was one place in which you can just learn every single node within geometry nodes. Well, then I have good news for you, because a couple of months ago I released the Big Notebook. It's a book that explains every single node within geometry nodes, that starts from the very basics to very advanced techniques. The book is available on my Gumroad and it's also updated to Blender 4.0, so it has all the new nodes in them. So go to the link in the description and get your copy of the Big Notebook today. And with that being said, if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, comment down below if you have any questions, and if you don't want to miss out on any future videos, I recommend subscribing. And with that being said, I see you in the next one.